Welcome to the Octopod. I'm Kyle Davis, head of the Office of the CTO. Join us as we dive into the latest technologies and trends shaping business. Whether you're a tech enthusiast, a business leader, or just looking to stay ahead in the digital age, this podcast is for you. Let's unlock opportunities with technology together. Let's jump in. So this time we're going to delve into our topic of Beyond 2024 Cybersecurity Decoded. And today I'm joined by Rich and Harps from Rubrik. Guys, would you like to introduce yourself for everyone?
Hi, so my name's Harpinder, or Harps for short. I'm the lead channel SE for Rubrik in the UK.
Hello, I'm Richard Cassidy. I'm field CISO for EMEA for Rubrik.
Excellent, thank guys. So today we're going to break this session into three parts. The first of them talking about the evolution of threats and how we're seeing the change of attackers in today's world. The second part, we're going to delve into some of the data out of the Rubrik Zero Labs report and what that tells us about them threats. And then thirdly, we're going to focus on how can we evolve the way we protect our organizations to counter the changing actors out there. So let's get into it. So guys, welcome back for part two. In part one, we really looked at the evolution of the threat actors and how they're changing the way they interact with your organization. And that really leads us on nicely to the Zero Labs reports that you create over there at Rubrik and the value they can bring both to customers and to yourselves. So Harps, what is Zero Labs and where does it come from?
So Rubrik Zero Labs is basically Rubrik's data threat intelligence hub. It's headed up by somebody called Steve Stone. And essentially what we use here is we've got a lot of data ourselves at Rubrik. But the problem with just utilizing your own data is you get data bias. Is that what Rubrik Zero Labs team does is they've spoken to over 1,600 organizations across various different verticals. Over half of them are at C-level to try and get information from people who are not our customers as well, so that we remove the data bias and utilize that information not only to just make our slides look pretty, but it is going back into our product development. So if you think about what Rubrik Zero Labs does is getting that insights from the industry. We've also got our own ransomware response team that on a day-to-day basis deals with any kind of cyber attacks. There's a lot of intelligence there. And that intelligence is what's being used to drive product development at Rubrik. So Rubrik Zero Labs basically operates 12 to 14 months in advance of where we are today. So they already know what Rubrik would look like in 12 to 14 months' time.
Yeah, and ensure that value and future protection is always one step ahead as best as we can be. No, that makes sense. So reading the report is a great source of information, but some of the stats that are in there are just quite frightening, really, from that side of it. So I thought it'd be cool just to pick out some of them stats and talk about what they mean from both of your opinions, really. So the first one there is that 98% of respondents saying that some form of incident made it up to senior level within an organization. I mean, that's probably not unexpected, but still 98% is not a small number. But how does that actually relate to real world breaches that you see from the report?
So it goes along the lines of what we've been telling all of our customers, which is expect to be hit and expect to be hit constantly. Cyber attacks are not going away. Ransomware attack at the moment happens every 11 seconds, and in 7 years' time, it'll happen every 2 seconds. So it's not something that's going away. If anything, it's just getting worse. Out of the people that we spoke to, 52% of those actually suffered a data breach.
That's quite a significant number then. So it's clear that we're not addressing some of the core problems that exist within this space, which is something we'll talk a little bit more about in the third part. But how much do you see this as a 0-day issue versus actually something that we actually knew about and could have done something about if we'd had the foresight or the processes or procedures in place to help?
So we actually seen that 61% of the attacks leveraged known vulnerabilities, which is a very high number, and it's something that we have spoken about in the last session as well. But what's more scary is not just the fact that they're leveraging known vulnerabilities, is the fact that 11% of the people we spoke to actually admitted that they haven't addressed the vulnerabilities that let the bad actors in the first place.
So they're vulnerable then to just go around the same loop again.
Absolutely. So there's an open door that's to let the bad actors come in, but they haven't gone and locked that door after attack. So not only are they vulnerable to further attacks utilizing the same methods, But what's probably even more scary is, for me, 11% is a really high number. That's 11% of the people that actually admitted it. So
it's probably a higher number than that.
higher.
Yeah. That makes sense. And Rich, from your perspective, with your sort of CISO hat on, as it were, why are we in this position of 61% of known vulnerabilities? If they're known, surely we'd do something about them, but clearly we're not doing if the number is 61%.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate ad infinitum battle that every organization is facing. I'm sorry to be the bearer of even more bad news, but it's only going to get worse. So let's talk about the statistics behind this. So last year, there were around 3,700 new CVEs released in the marketplace. That's in 2022, by the way, so actually a year before. And then last year that grew to 28,800 or so. And if that continues the rate of growth that it seems to be on the trajectory for, we're going to be dealing with around 110 new vulnerabilities a day as businesses. And so that's why that statistic is what it is. There's just too many out there for organizations to manage. So that tells us something. That tells us that we've got to get better in the industry. Businesses have to get better at managing existing vulnerabilities. But also, and this may be a contentious point, but I'm a big advocate of this, is that with what happened with Microsoft last year and the SharePoint breach, the US Senate have become almost disgruntled about the scenario that occurred, and you can read up on it at your leisure. And now the US Senate want to start holding vendors to account when they have a software vulnerability that leads to a breach of an organization, therefore damage. And I think that's a good idea. At Rubrik, for example, we have a liability up to 10 million should you not be able to recover your data, deploying our products and services in the right way, of course, using our technology. And so other vendors need to follow suit. They need to say, we believe in what we're doing, so much so that we will provide a liability level. And so I hope the industry does take that path, because organizations can't keep on top of this. So vulnerabilities are increasing at a rate that we just can't manage. And that's why that statistic of 61% known vulnerability is as it is. And it's only going to get higher, in my opinion, if we don't do something about it.
So if we then help organizations on that strategic journey to choose the right vendors, to change the way that they procure products and services, because as much as you can do your own internal processes on software you develop, a lot of the time you're buying and consuming that software now as a service, and you don't have control over the development process of what Microsoft do, for example. So you're at their whim from that side of it. But you could choose between firewall vendor A and firewall vendor B, potentially, one that is coding in a different way and giving different outcomes. And it's a strategic change in mindset that we need to follow. So that's definitely an interesting trend from that side of it. But where do we see, and is it that proliferation that's driving the confidence of senior leaders in their ability to recover effectively? I think we saw, 33% of senior leaders weren't confident they had the capabilities to recover. And I don't think that's a people problem. It's a state of the industry. It's an adoption of tooling and processes, etc. But do we think them two things are linked?
I think they will be linked, definitely, because if a third of the organizations, their leaders don't believe that they can recover their critical data, then it's not a damning statistic on the staff or anything like that. It is down to tools, processes, and what they've got in place. But also testing as well. Not many organizations have the ability to just test whether they can recover or what they would do in the event of a breach, for example. So there's too many unknowns, and that's kind of leading towards that figure. And ultimately that leads to, I think over half of the people we spoke to have said that they're probably most likely to pay a ransom, which is not what we want them to do, because not only is it bad because they'll get labeled as a payer, but obviously there's a lot of impact on that as well if they do actually pay a ransom.
And not necessarily guarantee they're actually going to get the keys to the castle back, or they're not just going to get all the data leaked anyway, or, well, thanks for paying once, then, I'm going to ask you for some more money and some more money into it, so.
Yeah, I wanted to touch at a point a little bit earlier around the strategies and the way organizations approach the problem. But on your point, Harps, around ransomware, in the same Zero Labs report that we're referring to here, we, in the same demographic, saw that 46% of organizations that paid the ransom in the report that we're referring to were those that hopefully got their data back. But actually, of those 46% that paid, only 16% recovered all of their data. And, that's a real harrowing statistic. And now you've got governments saying, we want a sort of a broad stroke paintbrush view that you don't pay the ransom. And if you do, then there's going to be all sorts of repercussions for that. If you look at the British Library, only at 7 million recovery costs for the ransomware attack they suffered last year. And you've got to really understand, is the hope strategy, and that isn't even a strategy, that we've been applied to technology over the past couple of decades, that we have. We've been purchasing vendor tools, I say this a lot, buy 100% of the product, use 20% functionality, and there's a lot of CISOs, I've heard it time and time again, well, I bought this technology, it should have worked. Why didn't it work? Hope is not a strategy. To all the CISOs out there, you have to look at the worst case scenario. And if we put our clear view glasses on, and we look at the world as it is, the fact is we're going to see a data breach in our organizations. So what is your strategy when that occurs, right? That's got to be the question you ask, and that's got to be the argument you take to the board for budget and spending conversations, in my opinion.
No, it makes 100% sense. And I always say to a lot of people is sit around a table and work out how to put your own business out of business within 24 hours, because that's what the attackers are doing.
Absolutely.
Don't think about it as a defense thing. Actually sit down and work out how you'd kill yourself. And then you'll work out that actually it's got nothing to do with technology potentially. It's going to be this business process off the left field somewhere that cripples you, and that's going to be the entry point. That failure to imagine the possible is always going to be the thing that someone else does imagine and therefore breaches you from. So it's a crazy world, and 52% paying the ransom is no wonder it's big business.
No.
Definitely.
And just on this, it's, like I said, it's not the purpose of Zero Labs, not to just get loads of stats to scare everybody. We actually want to do something on the back of it. So as I mentioned before, this is going back into product development. We are trying to evolve ourselves to cope with this and try to help our customers. So for example, we talked about exfiltration of data. We're seeing that a lot. So we have delved into the area of data security posture management with our purchase of Laminar to try and help customers from that. But even the normal things, we mentioned about 61% leveraging known vulnerabilities. We've always had threat hunting abilities to be able to look for IOCs in your environment. But now recently we are trying to be a bit more proactive. So threat hunting is now going to be threat monitoring as well. So we'll use intelligence from Rubrik Zero Labs, from ransomware response team, to build up a dynamic list so that we can look at a known malware that's coming for the first time, rather than just looking back at dated stuff. So, and also, as we mentioned before, there's escalation of privileges is on the increase. So we're now trying to profile users to try and see, is a user, has anyone's credentials been elevated, for example. So we're trying our best to try and utilize the stats we get with the known vulnerabilities that are out there, and what we're seeing is going to be happening, to try and be one step ahead of the game to help our customers.
No, that makes sense. And I think that shows the evolution of Zero Labs as well. I mean, early days, it was very much retrospective piece, but now we're seeing Zero Labs actually try and look at projecting out into the future.
Absolutely.
Massive data growth. I think we all know that, data is going to grow exponentially. That's a stat that's, everyone's throwing around there, but the amount of personal or attackable data is going to grow within that piece as well. Therefore, the risk is going to become, even more prevalent over time. But what do you see as that big trend in the futures that we're seeing through Zero Labs, guys?
So what we're seeing is that, for the first time, we're actually doing predictive analysis. So whereas the first report was looking back, the second report was looking at today, and now the third report, we're actually doing predictive analysis. So you can go on the Zero Labs page and input your own data quantities and whichever vertical you're in to change the report to what's more relevant to yourselves. But what we're seeing is that over the next 5 years, that data is going to grow 7x. So what's interesting in the report is within Rubrik Security Cloud, we've got a concept of having a data security score. And that's where we would rate you as, give you a score based upon, the protections that you've got, data protection, ransomware, sensitive data. And we provide like a score for a customer in terms of
like a maturity sort of thing.
Yeah, like a cybersecurity score. But what we've seen in the report, based upon our trends as well, is that over the next 5 years, data is going to grow 7x, but that data security score is only going to increase by 7%. So it's 7x, 7%. There's a huge gap there between how much data is growing and how your customers are evolving their security to make sure that they are in a better position. So we need to bridge that gap, because as long as that gap is really big, then there's more potentials for bad actors to get in, really.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Cool. So hopefully that gives everyone a bit of an overview of what Zero Labs is. Some of the stats are very interesting. I think we should use this information to really think about how we deploy technology, how we evolve processes, how we fundamentally change the way we approach this whole conversation, really, because to your point, Richard, earlier, CISOs have to think about this differently. Otherwise, we're not going to change the paradigm. We're just going to keep spending more money and having more breaches, which, at some point is going to become, non-sustainable. It probably is today, to be honest with you. So with that, we will move on to our third part, where we'll start looking at, where has Gen AI played its part in this explosion, but also how can we practically do something different to fix these problems. So, guys, thanks for your time, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening, everyone. I've been Rob Sims, Chief Technologist from CDW.
I've been Harpinder Singh Powar, Lead Channel SE for Rubrik in UK.
I've been Richie Cassidy, Field CISO for EMEA.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Be sure to check out the back catalogue for more great insights. Don't forget to subscribe via your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. And if you have a topic you want us to cover, feel free to reach out. Catch you next time.